Can remove background noise. Okay. Um, and she wanted to stay at Open Flow, so I'm like, yeah, cool, come for a week. You don't have to pay anything, just come and stay. And she stayed here. She's an Indonesian person from an island called Sumatra, which is kind of like the main island of one of the main islands of Indonesia. And she has her own little learning center there, and she just wanted to come and check it out. So she stayed for a week, and man, she left like totally changed. And she went back to where she was from, and she got like five local schools together, and something like, hundreds of kids that were walking around. They were picking up trash, but they were also talking about like why the soil is important and why it's important to have a different community feeling and why it's important to tell the school leaders that we need to have infrastructure and all of this stuff. So she just kept in contact since, and now she's talking about doing all sorts of like educator training and agreements with universities and stuff like that. So that's cool.
That's incredible. Wow,
Yeah,
congratulations. Good for you. Way to
yeah,
spread
it's
your
nice.
spread your passion.
It's nice to hear, right? And I know from our last call, it was like, okay, well, what are the next steps for you? What are the where's it going? How's it going to get there?
I think that immediately one of the next steps is going to be really like starting to build a sense of community among some of like my early adopters and the people who really want to get involved. And I think that, it starts with having conversations with people like you who are already so invested in this area and already have a lot of kind of connections in the space. And in the same way that, you inviting me to that school community allows me to just speak with, a number of other educators who all have some kind of non-traditional views on education. And, like I've thought about different ways that I can continue to build that community by, creating more like short form content to share with my followers, by creating a YouTube channel, by creating like an online forum similar to what you did through school, because I think that that's a great way to connect people, to show people what you really care about, and like to give them a reason to be a part of the community before I actually have a product to offer. But what I can offer right now is a place to share ideas, a place to share information, and a place to just like kind of ground perspective and remembering that environmental education is something that's important, but it's not just about environmental education. And that's something that I'm really happy to like be able to understand. And being a part of that community forum is really, really helpful because it's not just about environmental literacy. It's about like being able to learn applicable real life skills from a young age. It's about, in early childhood education, treating people as people who are capable of learning new things and challenging traditional ways of thinking rather than just treating them as little kids who need to be indoctrinated into the same ways of thinking that we've been using for thousands of years. So I think it really starts with that community. And I have something kind of exciting to share. But I was interested in going to the North American Association of Environmental Education conference. So I
Yeah,
was looking into their resources and I came across one of their featured speakers, and her name is Christina Kwok. And one
yeah,
of my best friends, his name is Leon Kwok. And I know that, it's probably not the most uncommon name ever, but I certainly, was curious enough to reach out to Leon and ask
yeah,
him if he knew who she was. And they
yeah.
were cousins. And he gave me a warm introduction over email. And now I
Cool.
have the opportunity to speak with her on Thursday. And
Yeah,
like those are exactly the ways that, I intend to build this community, through connection, through building interpersonal relationships with people who really care about this issue, and
yeah,
finding the best ways, the best places to, implement my tools and practices to create that paradigm shift.
yeah. That's so cool, man. And how can you, like, you can't forecast that. You can't be like, okay, I'm going to do Idori, and then I'm going to meet this person, and then that person's going to open up because it's their cousin. You can't actually
Hmm.
see that. But it's the process which is so powerful, isn't it? It's the process of what you personally go through, what you personally like have an intention of going into a space completely open. just with the purpose, just with that vision, just with that clear feeling that you have. Because your feeling drives your thinking and your feeling drives your willingness, and that opens spaces for you, and spaces that you can't actually imagine, yeah? Because there is a warm invitation that comes. And that warm invitation
A-
is received so differently than it's like a cold call or a cold email and just seeking some networking and here's this is this. It's like it opens up avenues like this. And that's really, really
Absolutely.
fascinating because it's like moving into, now I don't think this is the term yet, but I've been hearing it of late, and there's a definite, like a different evolution of that. It's like the age of missionaries. Now, for me, missionary still has a lot of negative connotations about how, like historically, and what missionaries set out to do. Which many of them did such beautiful work, but a lot did such damaging work to culture and place and connection to people and land and all of that kind of horrific stuff. So I think there is a different terminology for that. But in principle, a missionary goes out to serve the world like a saint, goes out to be of service to the world. And whether it's an idea on education or environmentalism, whatever that is, it is about bringing the value before expecting it back right here. It's delivering the
Mm-hmm.
value from this place of heart, of consciousness, of awareness, of the importance of a global need or a world need or a community need, and then saying, you know what, I'm going to actually be that. And my product or my book or my story and my narrative is is really the process within that. It's a manifestation from me. And
Mm-hmm.
if I can then share my process of which we're doing right now, and like when you say, "Oh, I've got some cool news," I'm like buzzing. I'm like everything is popping because that is so fun. And as I said to you before, we hopped on. Let's have some fun, and it should be fun because it's a different source
Absolutely.
to kind of draw upon. So that's so cool, man. I'm really happy for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we have to celebrate our little successes because, it's,
Yeah,
being an entrepreneur can be challenging at times. So it's really important for us to, take our wins. But
yeah,
yeah, something that you just touched on, which I think is a really amazing point, is that people try to take the people out of business sometimes. And, the more experience that I have in this industry, the more that I realize how important it is to stay grounded in what really like does impact people, especially when we're talking about things like education and sustainability. Like these are innately human factors, and you're not going to enact change by cold emailing a bunch of people that you have some generic product. You're going to make change by engaging in real discourse, by really challenging thinking, by talking to people who have creative ways about thinking about things, like the way that we educate our children.
yeah,
And I think that there's like it connects so heavily to the systems thinking course of Fritjof Capra. I don't know if you were able to watch any of those lectures that we were
yeah,
shared with through Born Global, but I think his whole ideology that like you can't look at anything as a singularity is so accurate. And when you try to like, cold email someone, when you're just outreaching, just like throwing out, you're you're treating it as if it's a singularity that's going to be able to respond to you, and you're not utilizing your network, which is what Capra, like strongly believes in. And this
yeah,
example of, like me randomly stumbling upon, one of my friend's cousins, obviously it relies on luck to some extent, but you also have to position yourself for that luck, by consistently making, new friends and putting myself out there and expanding my organic network of people that I know. And then by also going to different environmental education conferences, embedding myself in the communities that, are full of people who care about the same issues as me. I'm increasing the likelihood that I'm going to have those meaningful conversations and meet those people that really want to engage in that kind of discourse with me.
yeah, yeah. You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm picturing how when your activity starts as an entrepreneur, as a whatever you want to call it, as someone who lives, who starts to feel their purpose through what they do, where work and life, all of a sudden it's like, hang on a minute, it's really just my life. It's my life. This is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing with my life. And I'm consciously choosing that. And then your activity kind of does this, like a small kind of spiral, and then your network grows and your way you see things and people and opportunities. and all of a sudden it takes you all the way out to here. And then you're like, hang on a minute. Am I still operating from the same purpose? Have I become so engaged with all of this activity and network and busyness and business that maybe the ego is kind of taking over a little bit? Maybe I need to just kind of re-step all of that and be like, just check in, right? Because it can happen very fast too. And the scale can happen really fast. But are you ready for that? Is your mind ready for that? Are you really holding your intention when that lure of money or investment comes? Are you really understanding the relationship in terms of investment? And is it an aligned purpose? Is the relationship there? Is it something where we can actually see 5, 10 years into the future and say, it will still be what I see for the world? It will still be what I intend to deliver to the world with a different understanding of the world as I evolve too. Naturally, my product, naturally, my way of presenting that will evolve too. So it's really, really interesting to think through, right? You have to go there because you enable your visualization to go there. And the universe
Mm-hmm.
kind of bang back, and then you can be like, well, okay, like, who's Noah today? Like, who's Noah today, and who's Noah tomorrow? And that's the most important thing, man. When it's like you can really, really not even look at yourself in the mirror. You can really sit with yourself and be really cool with yourself and say, wow, I never knew I could be Noah like this.
That's a really good point. A metaphor that I've really become kind of fond of in the past couple years when thinking about this concept of like who I'm becoming by, doing all of this work, by making all of these connections and how I'm changing from, the initial person, the starry-eyed freshman in college saying, "Oh, I want to go change the world by, teaching kids how to behave more sustainably." I think that like a tree is a great metaphor and something that I like to kind of like base a lot of my behaviors off of. And like the metaphor that I'm speaking of is really that, they look like they're branching out so far into the world and they're creating so much life with all like the greenery in their leaves. But you have to remember that, they have a much stronger network of roots. Their foundation, where they come from, the resources that they pulled out of the earth to grow these branches, you can't forget about all those things that are going on beneath the surface. And, a tree with big branches and small roots is much more likely to fall down than a tree with big roots and small branches. So it's really important to like remember where you come from, to remember like what your purpose is, what your passion is, what all the resources that you took from the earth to bring you to the position that you are today, and how that allows you to grow and branch out and create new value for the world. So, I think like I never want to forget like the real reason that I started this, which is, it's not to make money, and it's not to, start some giant school. It's to, make kids care more about nature. It's to help people appreciate, the beauty that exists right outside of our doors. And, like I think there's so many different ways that can come to fruition. It might be, a children's brand like Sesame Street, where I create these characters and TV shows. And if that's what's going to engage kids the best and create this movement, then I'm so happy to have that what Adori becomes. But
Yeah.
if that turns out not to be authentic enough to really influence behavior, then I'm fully, prepared to make more of a shift and to do something in line with what I originally set out to do, which may be more like going into schools myself and running workshops or working with after school programs or other environmental organizations. I haven't exactly learned, the best way that I'm going to be able to spread my branches out without, becoming too susceptible to blowing over and losing all that foundation. But it's all grounded in remembering what I really care about, which is
Yeah.
making kids appreciate nature, helping kids see that the earth is something beautiful and it's something that we need to take care of.
Yeah. Touch on so many points, and they're really, really, really like insightful, but really beautiful points too. And a tree will only grow where there's soil. And then what's your soil like? And then how thick is your topsoil layer? And then what lies underneath that? Because someone sent me recently of a big wind rainstorm in Dubai, because they do cloud seeding there, right? And it's the green area in a
Mm-hmm.
place called Al Barari, and some big beautiful trees come, like a lot of big beautiful trees have come down. And we think that the trees go deep, 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 deep into the earth, and some do with various tap roots, but they more go across, right? So they keep stable by distributing their root system across the surface, which gives them that kind of that flex. It's not just down, of course it goes down, but also you have to understand that the nutrient-rich soil is only in the top 2 to 3 feet of of topsoil. That's the most nutrient-rich. So it's one thing to think of the analogy of soil, which is absolutely spot on. I'm not saying it's not something to think about, but I also think about the iceberg then. So we go to a different ecosystem, and what you see at the top is just a fraction of what's at the bottom. So you kind of pop up, then you're like, whoa, there's a whole world down here. And I'm kind of either attached to a greater glacier, or I'm floating in a big, big ocean, and I'm quite
Mm-hmm.
insignificant scale of things. So all of these indications, we use terms like biomimicry and systems thinking, which you mentioned, which is like a phenomenal way to look at life, is actually just life experienced through life. And these are indications from if we have a connection to nature. It's not a trivial connection of, oh, save the environment, we're like hanging out with the trees and all of this. It's a deep, deep understanding of the fundamental principles of life. And if we feel those, this is the thing. If we feel those from a systems thinking level, if we feel those from a biomimicry level, if we feel them from a conservation and ecological level, then we actually become those. And whatever we do is on that same conducive basis of being there in the nutrient topsoil layer, and we're sprouting all over the place, and we have fruits all over the place, and we have flowers, and the bees are coming, and the regenerative cycle can really, really catalyze and scale. So it really is looking at things like systems thinking that gives indications of how you can do phenomenal things in business. And there's nothing wrong with
Mm-hmm.
money. Nothing wrong with money. It's the relationship with money. It's I don't want to make money from it because I just want to be like happy and I do help the world. And well, what happens when you actually can use that money to transform mindsets, and you can catalyze things. I opened up by saying this person in remote Indonesia, and look at what she's doing. Look at what she's doing. That's because we set an intention of, you know what, we're going to do this with the money we have. We're going to invest a little bit into you, and we're going to set you free. So you go and regenerate over there now. That's all you. That's not me. So money, when it really is in a symbiotic future network, that's when it's really interesting, because you have 3 levels of symbiosis. As you know, you have the parasitic, which is all about, I'll take from you, Noah. Hey, Noah, I'm going to take all from you, until you're living there like, oh, what happened to Idori? Where did it go? And then, it's the host that then it's one entity, which is just, kind of feeding off the other. And then you have mutual symbiosis, where I actually need you. I need you, Noah. I need Idori, because I need to access those children and those places and spaces and that conference over there. And in return, what can I feed to you? And you have this whole, what I call a lemniscate, like this infinity loop of past, present, future, different space, different time zone, but mutual symbiosis. And that's a whole different way of looking at finances. You would have heard Fritjof Capra talk about how the financial forecasting from a systems thinking view is not about, a chronological, it's not about the rows and columns. It's about a mapping. That's a
Mm-hmm.
different way of looking at financial forecasts. And with your business background and so on and studies, it's like, whoa, okay, I see the world differently. So now I have to create it differently. And I have to see those people
Mm-hmm.
and make network. So, yeah, a lot of different places I went there, but
Yeah.
it's really, really amazing, really cool stuff.
You just touched on a really interesting point, which I think is this idea of like kind of almost surface level impact versus like a deeper impact. And like I'm thinking about like what I'm really trying to create with Adori, and I see like two possibilities here. There's one where, I create like this resource that just spreads the message of like, okay, protect the environment because it's something that we should care about. And
Yeah.
that's a really positive message. And I think that that has, the potential to create some real impact. And that's something I would still feel happy about. But I think that there's a deeper layer there than just like, let's spend time outdoors, let's pick up trash, let's hang out outside. But I think like really going into like the systems thinking ideology of like how it's all connected. If I think about like my relationship with nature and what's, brought me to want to pursue the career path that I'm currently, thinking about,
Yeah.
I think back to, being a little kid and working on my garlic farm and, like having my hands in the soil and, having that relationship where I know the smell of the soil, having the relationship where I know that because of the quality of that soil, because of how rich it feels in my hands, because of the way that it smells, I know that the garlic that grows out of that soil is going to be so much higher quality. And therefore, I don't just care about taking care of the soil because I know it's the right thing to do, because I know that I'm helping to protect future generations of people. That's important too, but I'm also protecting the soil because I've actually felt, I've tasted, I've smelt, I've felt with my physical hands the
Yeah.
ways that, how I behave can impact the soil. I don't want to overwater it. We should rotate our crops because if you extract too much out of it, then it's going to become this dirt that's doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. And I've seen that with my eyes. I've seen the color change. So when you've seen it, you've smelled it, you've felt it, you've tasted it, you have a much more intimate relationship with it. And I think that that's the kind of relationship that I want to build. So like not just this surface level idea of like, oh, the earth is beautiful and we should take care of it. Saying that the earth is beautiful, that's just touching on sight. That's just touching on one of the senses. But Capro would definitely recommend to look at it from a more systems point of view, which is that we have a relationship with nature through all of our senses. And if you engage all of the senses, you're going to connect so much, you're going to have a much deeper connection with someone than if you just touch on one of their senses. So I think that that's something that I'm going to hope to add into the activities and really forcing people to engage all of their senses because it builds that deeper connection.
Mm. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. You mentioned there were two words I picked up on. One was think, and one was hope. So you mentioned that when you said, I think that's going to be something I'm going to add into that. It was like, no, I think you know. So, and when you live in hope, it's like, oh, I really hope that will happen. Well, I'm going to will it into the world, right? And I'm going to instill hope in other people and other places. And when there's hope, there can be trust. And when there's hope, there can be action and a willingness action. And this is the level of detail that we have to go to into our minds, because our thinking drives our speaking. Our thinking and our speaking drives what we vibrate into the world and what we present in the world. And it's really from a place of what you're saying about, I know from my own experience what that soil represents to life, because I'm alive. And when I have that, I know that microbial life has exponentially increased the nutritional value of that food that I'm going to use to put into my body to regenerate me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we go. Actually, I'm a consequence of the soil. Sounds odd, but that's where we all go. In the end, we all go back to the soil. And that's a really, really beautiful picture of unity. And we know at a global level, the soil degradation and the soil quality and the microbial content is severely declined because of chemical usage and pesticides and all sorts of stuff, which is widely researched and known. So if we mimic that process as a regenerative process in our conviction, which is our purpose, because our purpose doesn't hide under a rock waiting for us to be like, hi, I'm your purpose. When we feel our purpose and we have conviction in our words, when I say I am going to, actually I'm not I will do it, I am doing it. I am doing it. And I am going to do this, and this will happen. And it's not an ego thing, it's a conviction. It's a conviction where I need you. I need your help to do this. This is what I'm doing. I'd love to listen to what you're doing. And together we can discover a new space in between which has never been created before. This conversation has never been created before. And that brings a whole new neural network and possibility of how we outwardly perceive the world and the interconnectedness of our activity. It's from your independence, Noah. You chose to do this. You chose to be doing Idori. You chose to be on the Born Globe. You chose to talk to that person and say, hey, I think that's your cousin, or that's what you did. That's all you. And I chose to do all that I chose to do and are doing. And then when it's like, well, I'm independent and you're independent. So if we can be independently interdependent, it's that movement of this and that. And it's like, well, that's cool because what I'm doing over here without you is super, super rich. And what you're doing over there without me is super, super rich. And the cool thing is, so it's a long way of saying that when you actually make organic fertilizers, the exponential increase in microbial life that can happen in a very short amount of time from a process of fermentation is absolutely beyond belief. And they're old traditional permaculture, we call it permaculture, but they're really ancient agricultural practices of just compounding life. And what that does when you put it back in many different places. I mean, that's really, really what, for me, that's what my work is. And when I see someone like you and Idori and this emerging venture and these emerging things coming in conferences and things, it's super, super exciting because it is a different vibration. It's a different vibration of entrepreneurship. It's not, I'm going to make all my money and it's mine. That is collapsing. It's collapsing because people are calling it out. And it feels like you need to hide because the world, consciousness, people who are thinking, feeling in a different way and speaking in a different way are almost like reducing that vibration and that sound or transforming that into a higher vibration and sound. And that's a really cool time. It's 2023. Like, it's really cool to be here. It's cool to be able to
Yeah, it
talk
is a really exciting time to
with
be in.
different generations, and there's some sort of like crazy similarity and anomaly that's happening, and it's called life and just connection. And we exhibit that through work like Idori, and that will influence because it has influenced children. And it's brought this whole imaginative picture of like, who are these characters? Where do they come from? Why are they going here? What's the whole underlying narrative? And then on a youth level, you represent someone that is actually just, you know what? I can talk a lot and I can do a lot at the same time. So no wonder why I'm talking a lot.
That's a
Yeah,
really good point. I think that like especially like we've been seeing a lot in the past few years, a lot of people trying to extract value without creating any value for the world. And you see, all of these like Amazon and drop shipping and crypto businesses all coming up and like you ask them like what their purpose is and they don't have a real like, value driven purpose. They're at the end of the day just trying to increase profits by extracting value, by getting people to pay for an online course that may not be adding to their life.
yeah,
But I think that you're absolutely right. People are recognizing that those businesses aren't going to be what's going to build a better world. We need businesses that create value, businesses that are mission driven, that are value driven. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful opportunities with, the work that both of us do is that we totally understand that not every single kid that we interact with we're going to have like an absolutely life changing impact on. You know, is that the dream, the hope? Absolutely. I aspire to do that as much as possible. But it's really understanding that, authentic relationships can't be necessarily scaled to some product that you could sell to everyone. And, in order to have like a real relationship with a child where you really walk them through those steps of understanding, okay, what is the value of this soil? Why does it feel this way? Why does it look this way? Why does it smell this way? What happens if we do this to it versus do this to it, and how does that make you feel as a behavior, and really touching on there emotions and, like their connection. We're all organically connected to the earth because we're made of the same matter that everything else with is, and it's just a matter of reminding people that that's the reality, and that we need to be grateful. And like, I feel like in general gratitude is not spoken enough about, and I think that gratitude is one of the pillars of life, because gratitude is almost like the realization or the actualization of systems thinking. It's like it's a realization. Gratitude is a realization that you are a part of something much bigger than yourself, and you are appreciating all of those things that have contributed to your life, rather than saying I am here and I have these expectations about what is the world to provide for me.
Yeah.
So I think that this has been a really beautiful talk, because it's put a lot of perspective on the messaging that I'm giving to kids and how I want to frame it. Because, I've thought about these concepts a lot, obviously, but it's really, really important to just ground everything that I do in the humanness and the naturalness that comes from the world. And definitely not trying to create any artificial relationships with the planet. I don't want to create any, I don't want to force any kids to love something that they don't actually love. I want to foster, a sense of passion, a sense of spirit that comes from them and not from me. And I'm not trying to indoctrinate anyone. And I really do like the word. I think that the word missionary is powerful, and I think that missionaries definitely like can be value driven and seek to create a better world. But I
Yeah.
also think that missionaries often try to get people to change their way of thinking to their way of thinking. And I don't necessarily think that I'm trying to get people to change their perspectives. I'm just trying to get them to realize something that they already know. I'm just trying to get them to appreciate things that they're already aware of as being important, to the extent that it impacts their behavior. So like, I know that there's many people out there who behave unsustainably, and they're able to smell fresh air and say, ah, this brings me joy. They're able to look outside at a mountain or a river and say, wow, this is natural beauty. This is something that we should protect. And it's just about really tapping into that and reminding them how important it is and how authentic our relationship with the world is, rather than just saying, oh, you should take care of it, otherwise you're going to die, or otherwise, the whole planet is going to disappear. Because then they're doing it because they feel pressured to do it, not because it's coming from that internal place of appreciation
Yeah.
of, and that really breaks down expectations, because right now people expect everything to come to them. They expect the earth to provide their plastic bottles, their computers, their iPhones, all of these resources that we take advantage of, but we don't have an appreciation that would force us to give back unless we really take time to reflect about where we come from, reflect about the idea that we come from the soil and we're ultimately going to end up back there. And therefore, we should care about protecting it because we're a part of it as much as it's a part of us, rather than, oh, it's this thing separate from us, but we need food that grows out of it in order to live, so take care of it. It's a
Yeah.
very, very different relationship with sustainability to be coming from, a point where it's relying on expectations versus relying on gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I think I think there's a couple of topics for our next conversation. Gratitude is definitely one of them. Um, I think it's actually a good place to kind of pause there and say that you have shifted my my mindset. You've opened my mindset on the word missionaries when you said mission driven. Okay, so that's something really really powerful for me, and I have gratitude to you for that. Um, and I think there's something to explore further into, the what you were mentioning about realization and helping people to realize things, not forcefully. And I think we should talk about gratitude and what that means in the story of you as Noah, but also what that means in the story of um, the evolution of Idori through that lens of gratitude and so on. So I'm going to put a pause here on our sharing, and I am just nesting in gratitude because I think you are a phenomenal person, and I think it's actually I just caught myself saying think. I know. I know because why? Because I feel. And because I feel, then I know. And when I feel and I know, then I think, then I speak. So I feel very grateful. Thank you, Noah.
I also feel very grateful, Peter. This conversation has been, very inspiring and motivating, but also grounding, which I think, if nothing else comes from these conversations other than an opportunity to ground ourselves and remind ourselves what we really care about and what we're really trying to accomplish, what we're really hoping and willing to accomplish, then I think some really amazing things are going to happen here. So I'm very grateful that I met you as well, and I'm
Yeah,
just nesting in this gratitude. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Well,
it's a good place to pause, and I can't
yep,
wait until our next conversation.
totally. Well, I know it's going to be amazing because it already is. So then the consequence
I
of
agree.
nothing already is means that it's going to compound. So we have to keep it up, okay? So let's do the same time next week. Is that cool?
Yeah, that works great for me.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to see you next week then.
All right, sounds good.
All
Have a
right.
good one,
Contact me
Peter.
anytime. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon.
Yep, sounds good. Have
Yeah,
a good
man.
one.
Bye
Bye bye.
now.